In 2006, we saw the ending of what could have been the Saw trilogy. Granted, in Saw 3, there were a lot of unanswered questions still at the time, but it would have been a fairly inconclusive, but also fitting ending to a decent horror trilogy, one of which did leave open doors for more entries, but also an ambiguous ending that would have been left up to viewer interpretation and theories for years to come. But with the box office success of Saw 3 back in 2006, earning $164.9 million at the worldwide box office, Lionsgate saw this as a very profitable series that could continue. So by the January of 2007, a script for the fourth entry in the series had already started development according to writer James Wan. But this was also the first entry in the series to not be written by Leigh Whannell or James Wan. It was released by Lionsgate Films in the United States on October 26th of 2007 and was written by Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan. And while it stayed true to the general formula, it received generally negative reviews from critics. Despite this though, the film was a box office success, grossing $139 million worldwide, where a sequel titled Saw 5 was already in development only a few months later. Even though neither James Wan or Leigh Whannell returned the rights Saw 4, Leigh Whannell told Fangoria that he and Wan would still executive produce, stating, "James Wan and I as executive producers are still treating this like our baby. We'll still oversee it. I've definitely been privy to the ideas they've had and the scripts they've been writing, and it's coming along well. I'm actually excited." That following month, Aaron Lynn Bousman, who previously directed Saw 2 and 3, was announced to return as director. David Hackle, who served as production designer for the two previous Saw films, was offered to direct the film, but the day he received the offer, his wife was diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately. Producers then offered him directorial duties for Saw 5 and Saw 6. As Whannell was uninterested in writing any more Saw films, Twisted Pictures sought new writers and ideas for the fourth film, making it the first film to not be written by him. An executive then discovered Marcus Dunstan and Patrick Melton and read their script, The Midnight Man. The executive thought that the duo's script could serve as a prequel to the first film, detailing a traumatic event in Jigsaw's early life. However, producers Mark Berg and Oren Kohlers did not want to do a prequel and dropped the idea, but the script led Dunstan and Melton to be hired to write the next three Saw films. Stepping into the franchise was also tricky for Dunstan and Melton given the film's serialized nature, but they counted with Bousman and the crew to overwatch them, pitching a trilogy which would start with Saw 4 and conclude in Saw 6. The duo did not have any trouble in bringing Jigsaw back into the story despite the death in his last film, as the character had been dying since the original, feeling that the film would not feel like a Saw entry without the character on it. Like in previous entries, rewrites took place during the writing process, leading to many unused ideas of the film to later be recycled for Saw 5. And even though Tobin Bell's Jigsaw character was killed off in the previous entry, in March of 2007, it was announced that he signed on for Saw 4 and Saw 5. Saw 4 then finished principal photography by May 3rd of 2007 in Toronto and released worldwide on October 26th. I like to think that over the years I've been a little bit lenient on Saw 4, considering that this is the first movie not to be written in any form by James Wan or Leigh Whannell. It's also an interesting film with a unique twist that I actually really fucking like. But rewatching Saw 4 recently in preparation to do this video, I did notice quite the handful of issues with this film. Don't get me wrong, I still really enjoy Saw 4. It actually has some of my favorite traps in the entire series and some of the most, well, at least one of the most deserving traps in any Saw film, in my opinion. In regards to its traps and also the entire story idea, I feel like this movie is inherently creative. I also feel personally that the way they bring back Jigsaw is something quite interesting, giving us an idea into Jigsaw's past, bringing back the character of Jigsaw, or John Kramer as he's also known, per his real name, providing the backstory with a very traumatic past, giving us a better insight into who he is as a person, into what he went through before he started his killings as the Jigsaw killer. I think that this is an incredibly interesting idea that for the most part really pays off. I think that this movie has a lot of things going for it. For one, I think the story of Saw 4 is really solid for the most part when it's involving Jill Tuck, Strahm, Perez, and Jigsaw. I think the introduction of Lindsay Perez and Peter Strahm is a very good choice, but it does provide a lot of problems which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this is a really cool FBI duo on screen that we are seeing right here that play off of each other really well. It's almost like a Batman and Robin situation, I feel. Peter Strahm being the Batman, Lindsay Perez being the Robin. He's always helping her on the case for her to help out and everything. in regards to solving this crime with the Jigsaw, them finding out, quote unquote, that they are the next 2 Jigsaw targets. But I just think Strum is sort of built different in regards to how his brain fucking works, in regards to seeing 4 walls build a home, and then he finds like all the things of Jill Tuck on the thing that they don't fucking belong. In regards to the room with Ivan, which I have a lot of fucking shit to say about Ivan in this movie. I'm not gonna go too far into it, but we'll talk about it with the traps, because I am so happy this guy died in such a fashion. It is super fucking therapeutic. But I feel like they provide such a dynamic that is very interesting, very snappy, very quick-paced in regards to a Saw movie. They're always bouncing off of each other really well. They're bouncing off of each other very quickly. They also have very good chemistry together as an FBI duo on screen in Saw 4. Peter Strahm and Lindsay Perez are really cool characters, and I also personally feel that Scott Patterson in particular does a damn good job in Saw 4 as Peter Strahm. He's a very likable, very assertive presence almost that is commanding the room at all times. And Scott Patterson, you know, he's a very prolific actor in many cases. Like, he's been in Gilmore Girls, Sullivan's Crossing, Her Best Move. He's a very good actor. Like, I've never personally watched Gilmore Girls in particular, but I've seen clips of him in the show, and he is very good. And in Saw 4, and I'll even say Saw 5, which we'll talk about soon, he is very commanding and very assertive with his presence, and he is always giving 100%. I also feel that Athena Kakanas, as well as Lindsay Perez, is a damn good actress. She does such an incredible job, and even though she definitely feels like she's undermining compared to Peter Strahm, I feel like there are certain moments in particular where she is commanding him at times, where she, if he lets her figure things out, she figures them out just as fast as he does. She doesn't necessarily need it spelled out for her like a lot of other characters that are police officers in these movies. Like, you look at the introduction to Daniel Riggs and Mark Hoffman, which the whole Mark Hoffman thing kind of makes sense when you look at Saw 4 compared to Saw 3, but with the opening of Saw 3. Alison Carey, when she opens up the door and everything, or arrives on the scene, I should say, regarding the whole, you know, classroom trap with Troy, she is literally spelling everything out to them and the other cops. Why was the door shut? Yeah, but why did you have to cut it down? Oh, it was welded shut. Exactly. He couldn't get out even if he tried. That's something that they should be able to figure out on their own. Why did the Carey have to spell it out for them? In this case, I feel like it's not a matter of Scott Patterson's Peter Strahm undermining Lindsay Perez. I just feel like she was a bit overshadowed because I feel Scott Patterson is a very commanding presence on screen. But I feel personally they do treat each other as equals. I also feel that Lindsay Perez is just as smart as a character and also assertive as Peter Strahm. They bounce off of each other really well, and neither of them have to spell things out for each other either. And that dynamic between the two of them and how they work together is so good in my opinion that it makes it actually kind of emotional when Lindsay Perez does get shot and she is wheeled off on the gurney towards the end of the movie during what seemed like a very random fucking trap almost. I don't know. I don't understand that one, personally, where she gets shot with like all the shrapnel pieces out of the Billy puppet. It's always been a bit strange to me. But let's talk about the flashback scenes, because in my opinion, the best scenes of Saw 4 are the ones between Peter Strahm, Lindsay Perez, and then Peter Strahm with Jill Tuck, and then the exploration of Jigsaw before the tragedy happened. Learning about Jigsaw, or John Kramer if you prefer to call him that, in regards to his early life when he was married to Jill Tuck. They were expecting a child. It was planned so meticulously around the year of the pig in regards to the Chinese zodiac. How his wife Jill Tuck had a miscarriage because of a criminal who was a drug addict barging into the health clinic that Jill worked at, slamming the door into her stomach where she was 7 months pregnant, and then she had the miscarriage, which is, bruh. That's something I really never like to see on screen in anything. Granted, for this story, I think it works, especially for a character like John Kramer. But at the same time, it's so disheartening to have any kill of a child in any film in general, let alone an unborn baby, or a baby in general. Let's talk about Jigsaw for a fucking second. But learning this backstory of Jigsaw, and also how good of a guy he was before all of this, like how honest and how faithful he was. Like when Addison, who from Saw 2, comes up and offers her services to Jigsaw, how he's like, "What are you doing? Do you know what this place is? You're a very pretty girl, go home." Like, he's very honest, and it's like he wants to help them, but indirectly, if that makes sense. He never agrees to her services, even though she's like, "Hi, honey, you look like you use some company." Like, I feel bad for Addison in a way, and I also really appreciate John and how he's there waiting in the car for his wife to get off work, and when something seemingly goes wrong, when he sees Cecil running out, he charges into that room, into that building to check on his wife, and then carries her to the emergency room, stays with her while she has just had the miscarriage. They're both suffering. Like, it seems like Jigsaw was a really lovely and gentle guy before all of this occurred. Like the fucking scene with the clock. You know what the meticulous thing about this isn't what's so wonderful? It's 300 years old and it's still ticking. He just seemed like such a lovely guy who was so passionate about clocks. No, engineering. He was an engineer, and you know, he had a business deal with Art Blank and everything. It was his lawyer. They had business deals and everything together. The best scenes in the movie are the flashbacks, in my opinion, and the scenes between Lindsay Perez and Peter Strum. They are very riveting, very investive, and the fastest paced scenes in the entire movie. In my opinion, unfortunately, every scene starts to grind to a halt when the main game happens. I'm going to be 100% honest. I am not that invested or interested in the traps in this movie. Granted, I think it has some of the best traps in the entire series. I love the scalping chair. What an inventive trap. That seems pretty fucking self-explanatory how to escape easily. Shoot the ponytail. I think I counted he shot 8 bullets. I'm sure 8 bullets would have shot through fucking hair. Not to mention plenty of glass around. He easily could have just shattered a fucking window or shattered a fucking painting and then ended up using that to cut her hair because she said just cut my hair. Rather than running off to the drawers, which you really think Jigsaw's stupid enough to leave drawers in the fucking house? But I love the scalping chair. Oh, Ivan's trap. Holy shit. The bedroom trap in this movie is so therapeutic. Having a predator, a sexual offender, put into a bed of his making essentially, and being torn apart limb by limb is so therapeutic. He dies in one of the goriest fashions in this entire series. Granted, it's very quick, and I think it was Dead Meat who pointed out the fact that something went wrong when they rigged up this thing on set, but it made for a more disturbing piece of imagery when one of the legs was like half torn off almost. I think it was Dead Meat that said this. Not to mention as well, I think it's very interesting. I'm looking at the Saw trivia right now for this trap, and apparently this was, the concept of this trap closely resembled an earlier concept for Detective Alison Carey's trap in Saw 3. However, as the creators decided to put her in the Angel instead, the concept wasn't used until Saw 4. So it's interesting looking at this trap now, the bedroom, and then thinking back that a similar concept was there in regards to Alison Carey in Saw 3 until they decided to put her in the Angel instead. I also think this is very interesting considering a lot of you in the comments for Saw 10 have said that that trap for Gabriella is actually almost like a flat iron, which is what the initial test was that was scrapped for Addison in Saw 2. Like, she was apparently meant to push her face up against a flat iron or something. I don't know. That could be it for Saw 10. Who knows? Yeah, here you go. In an early script of Saw 2, the trap plan for Addison was written to resemble a waffle iron. Upon trying to grab a syringe with the antidote, 2 clamps would trap her wrist and slow to heat up. In order to free herself, she had to press her face against the third hot iron positioning right in front of her. That's very cool, and that could very well be what it is in Saw 10. But then we've also, in Saw 4, got the Cupid's arrow trap, I think people call it. I don't know. And in my opinion, I think this is a trap that sort of had a bit of a misconception in regards to the overall purpose. Because, I'll just read out what the tape actually is, what it says here. The human body is a fascinating organism. It can withstand the most brutal injury, and yet repair itself miraculously. But you know this all too well. How many broken bones have you suffered at the hands of your husband? How many flesh wounds have you endured? With time, the bruises have healed, but your pain has not. Today, I empower you to take control of your life. Can you disconnect from the one thing that has brought you and others so much pain? With time, your wounds will heal. His, however, will not. Remove the ties that bind you or bleed to death from your inactivity. The choice is yours. This was Morgan's tape in Saw 4, in regards to the spike trap, I'm going to call it, not Cupid's arrow. But in the end, the symbolism is more or less remove the spikes, I should say, in regards to removing yourself from the ties that bind you to your abusive husband. She has been very silent in regards to the abuse to herself and her daughter, of which I don't think is fair. Because if there's an abusive husband in the situation, I think it's very unfair to say, oh, she deserves to be tested in this way too because she stayed silent and didn't speak up. She's afraid, for fuck's sake. So I think having Morgan be the primary in this trap, I understand the symbolism in regards to removing the ties that bind her, But at the same time, I don't feel like she should have been involved in this at all. I feel like personally, due to Rex being the one that was the abusive person, or the abusive husband and father to Morgan and her daughter, or their daughter I should say, he should solely be in a trap, not her. Granted, she may not have said anything and quote-unquote enabled it, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, and it's a little bit insensitive of Jigsaw in a way to really pin this entirely on her, because I don't think that's entirely fair. I have an abusive father. Like, it's not that easy, personally. Like, I know it wasn't easy for my mother. I know that personally. So, I don't think this is an entirely fair trap to have Morgan be the sole one. Granted, I understand the symbolism in regards to her removing the spikes and removing the ties that bind them, resulting in his death, or she bleeds out because of her inactivity, which is symbolism of her inactivity to speak up and everything. But it's a trap that I feel is a little unfair on Morgan in a way, and it should have solely been centered around Rex. But at the same time, I also have to point out this trivia right here. The creators of Saw 4 originally discussed the idea of having an elderly couple in the trap. However, this was changed as it was deemed too disturbing. The fact that this was initially meant to be an elderly couple is kind of fucked up. And I kind of agree that it's a little bit too disturbing of a concept, and I'm glad that it wasn't necessarily a young couple, but a younger couple than an elderly couple. Like, an elderly couple being in a trap like this, or in a Saw trap in general, just feels very mean. But all in all, taking out the thing, I actually really like the idea of the Cupid's arrow or the spike trap as a whole. I think this is a very simple but gory enough trap. One, it isn't connected to the vital organs where it would heal over time, and also the ties that bind would be separated. But at the same time, to do that, you have to kill the person that has been binding you this entire time, that you are afraid of and that you have been enabling, quote unquote. Again, I don't think it's entirely fair on Morgan. I think there is a certain level of justification, but it's more complicated than that in my opinion. Because of an abusive husband, an abusive father. She's obviously afraid, so is the daughter. We saw that in the flashback, that the daughter didn't exactly want to speak up because she is afraid, same with Morgan. Like, there's an entire flashback around this, so I don't think it's entirely fair. But at the same time, I'm glad Morgan survived, and the vital organs involved with Rex, I think he died deservingly, excuse me. But in regards to Rigg's test, I have a lot to say. Because I'm just going to read it out right here, because in my opinion, it's a little bit muddled as to the purpose of his test. The victim of this trap, or this test, was Officer Daniel Rigg. He woke up trapped inside the bathroom of his own apartment. Within 19 minutes, he had to face a series of tests all around the city in order to overcome his obsession with saving everyone around him. Thereby, he was led to believe that within these 19 minutes, he had to save his partners, Detective Eric Matthews and Detective Mark Hoffman. In fact, however, his test was designed to convince him not to save anyone, but rather to let them save themselves. After each test, he found a clue leading to the location of the next part of his game. Now, there are a few things I have wrong with this. One, he's a police officer. It is his sworn duty as a, protector of the peace, per se, as a federal officer. He swore a duty to the city to protect, to serve and protect. He is to save. Granted, he can't save everyone, but it is the duty to at least attempt to do so. And with that, him teaching him not to save everyone seems a little bit hypocritical in a way. Granted, this is a game more or less to, as we find out in Saw 5, get rid of literally everyone so he can be the sole hero of everything and go on with the Jigsaw murders and killings and traps undetected in a way. In this regard, I think it's a little bit silly. Because, one, why the fuck is this test taking place over the entire city? And within 90 minutes, how in the fuck does he get from his apartment to another unit complex, to then go to a school, to then go to the meatpacking plant, Gideon's meatpacking factory from Saw 3 within 90 minutes? He's going all over the fucking city in the open in 90 minutes? I'm sorry, it just doesn't seem fucking believable unless these are literally all places within the same block, which seems very unlikely. And not only that, he barely needs to participate in the game. Why not just go to a payphone on the street or ask a rando on the street and be like, hey, sorry, can I borrow your phone? Or, hey, do you have 50 cents so I can use the phone? I need to make a call. And then he calls 911 and is like, hey, this is what's going on. This is the next location. I'm going to go to this place, blah, blah, blah. Granted, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but like, you gotta play by the rules. Because we know that Art Blank is literally watching over Detective Riggs in this movie throughout the entire runtime, essentially, so if this happened, it wouldn't exactly work. But why this wasn't a thought of the Daniel Riggs, I don't understand, especially with his mindset of wanting to save everyone. The time he is given, it being in the open, seems a little silly, and also, it takes away the whole seclusion factor of the Saw movies that has been prevalent since Saw 1. The bathroom, the nerve gas house, the meatpacking factory. It's all been very secluded, so having it take place over multiple locations in the city provides so many issues in regards to, hey, why don't we just do this? Why don't I just make a call? And also, he could just not play the game. Like, every test as well was, they need to save themselves or suffer the consequences. So, why didn't he just do that? Like, it's very apparent. He learns to have them save themselves in Ivan's trap and also in Morgan and Rex's trap with him helping pull out the spike by handing her the key to unlock her binds. In regards to Saw 4 as well, in the scalping chair, why the hell, you know, it was very prevalent because it was a situation where you save the girl, but she will try to kill you, which she did attempt to do in the end per her own test for her manipulation over the tape. But at the same time, he should have figured out it was a little bit more fucking suspicious than that when he listened to said tape. I also need to point out as well that Saw 4 has a very big overuse of what I like to call obnoxious editing. I'm a big appreciator of invisible cuts in movies, and Darren Lynn Bousman proved this, that he is very talented with these in regards to just set design alone, with Detective Eric Matthews walking through the door to his apartment and then arriving on the crime scene in Saw 2, where he finds Mike, who was in the Venus flytrap, or the death mask per se. But at the same time, there is a massive overuse of this movie, I should say. Just alone in the scalping chair trap, there's like 3 cuts that go away to be like, hey, we ran the prints, we found out, all right, blah, 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 let's get everyone on the scene. And then it cuts back. It has a major pacing issue for that reason. And it also wasn't very clear. I know that Jigsaw is very fond of his riddles regarding his traps and everything in Saw. Like, that's just very, you know, it's a part of his charm. But having it be like, hey, you need to be here in less than 90 minutes, but you can't go through the fucking door. What? Granted, it is really cool to see Donnie Wahlberg back as Detective Matthews, and he's very unrecognizable at first. But at the same time, I think it's really cool seeing him in this movie, and his death is fucking splendid. Art Blank's The Mausoleum Trap is really cool as well. Hear no evil, see no evil. And then him being back, especially when he was an old associate of John Kramer at one point as well. With the spine cutter and him. I don't see him as a villain. A lot of people gave me shit in a video 2 years ago for not putting him as a villain. He's still being tested in this movie. Same with Zepp. Zepp is being fucking tested still. They're not villains. They've got their own tasks, their own game, their own rules to abide by. They're not villains in my opinion. But they die in glorious fashion. Mark Hoffman is then revealed in the twist to be the Jigsaw killer. Now, this provides an issue of mine with Saw 4. There is a fat fucking plot hole that is only there to trick the fucking audience. Saw 4 takes place during the events of Saw 3, as we find out towards the end. Peter Strahm walks in on Jeff, shoots him, and we find out that Mark Hoffman is the other apprentice that they have been looking for. It isn't Amanda Young. We know that Mark Hoffman was the one who set up the trap involving Detective Carey because Amanda Young couldn't have lifted him up and everything. Like, she weighed this many pounds. Allison Carey weighed this many pounds. There's no way she could have lifted her up. Nor John Kramer. He was near on his deathbed last time they saw him. So, when the name drop happened at the beginning of Saw 4 by Mark Hoffman himself, maybe Amanda Young, when they are suspecting another person involved, and then Peter Strahm immediately writes that off, they weren't aware of Amanda Young in Saw 3 being a potential accomplice before Detective Carey's trap. And Detective Carey, when they found her at the beginning of Saw 4, was not nearly decomposed enough to have it be any substantial amount of time for them to figure out this information. Not to mention, none of these name drops occurred during Saw 3 in regards to the cops even remotely suspecting Amanda Young. So, what? Like with Troy's trap, they were still suspecting who it could be, but literally that night or like a day or two later, the Detective Carey had no idea it was Amanda Young. Alright? Because hence her, you know, surprise when she saw Amanda walk in and said, that surprise when she realized just before she was going to die it was Amanda Young that had put her in this trap. Well, this was Amanda's test, her design per se. So why did Mark Hoffman drop the name of Amanda Young to Peter Strahm and everything when they found Detective Carey's dead body? We know that Saw 4 takes place during the events of Saw 3, and it's literally that fucking night that Detective Riggs is put in his game. Meaning Mark Hoffman, quote unquote, was put in a game and Detective Matthews was put in the game, revealing him to be the other accomplice and also revealing Amanda and John's death taking place at the exact same time in Saw 4 as it happened in Saw 3. These take place adjacent to each other. So why was the name dropped? Purely to trick the audience for the sake of a twist. And that's my biggest problem with Saw 4. A lot of the narrative is written around the twist. And they were so focused as of Saw 4 to have a twist be so shocking, so out of nowhere, to really befuddle the audience in a way to be like, oh my god, that they sort of forgot to write a narrative that was, one, interesting around the trap plot as well, because the trap plot in this is kind of boring outside of the traps. But Detective Riggs, nothing against the character or the actor. I think the actor is very good who plays Daniel Riggs. Like, Lyriq Bent is a very talented actor in my opinion and does a good job for what he has provided. But I feel like the narrative overall doesn't do itself justice and is really just working around the sake of a twist. And granted, you have to take the twist into account when you're writing a narrative, but it was so focused on a twist that it forgot to write an interesting narrative for the main plot. It was good at the flashbacks and everything with Peter Strahm and Lindsay Perez, but everything else was largely uninteresting in my opinion, fell flat, and was very discombobulated. It also creates a very big plot hole because in the end, they name drop Amanda Young at the beginning of Saw 4 when they find Detective Carey's dead body, even though it takes place during the events of Saw fucking 3. Out of nowhere, yet they had no idea of Amanda Young's involvement in Saw 3. A lot of people are like, oh, I've discussed this with a lot of friends of mine. I've also discussed this with a few YouTuber buddies of mine who are big Saw fans as well, and a few streamers. They're like, maybe it was explored between movies off camera. But that's a lazy excuse for bad writing in my opinion, because otherwise it would have been explored in Saw 3 or would have been explored more in Saw 4. Maybe we'll get a movie between Saw 2 and Saw 3 that sort of fixes this problem, kind of, in the future. Maybe it'll be a Rogue One Star Wars situation with the arc reactor inside the Death Star. But I don't know if anyone else has figured this out or pointed this out before, but it feels like a massive fucking, oversight in regards to name dropping Amanda Young at the beginning of Saw 4 just for the sake of the twist, to trick the audience and nothing else. Jigsaw did a similar thing in regards to, oh, it takes place 10 years later, but we did this only to trick the audience. More on that in my Jigsaw video. I've got a lot of things to say about Jigsaw. All in all, I think Saw 4 is a fine film that you can easily sit down and watch and enjoy. I still really enjoy Saw 4, but it's definitely more on the lower tier Saw movies in my opinion. Out of the 9 movies we have currently prior to Saw 10's release, Saw X, it's in like my bottom 3. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think it's a great movie. I enjoy it more than Saw 3D and Jigsaw, but I don't think it's better than any of the other films in this series. I'm gonna be 100% honest with all of you guys. It's one of the lower tier Saw movies in my opinion. It's not necessarily rough to sit through. It's definitely more enjoyable, but I'll say this. On my rewatch, it did take a couple sittings. It did take a few sittings for me to get through it. Like, I think I went from watching it on my TV, to then watching it on my computer, to then watching it on my phone at work, to finish watching it. Being 100% honest. But overall, Saw 4 is a fine watch. It does make me confused in a way as well in regards to, okay, was it cancer? Was it the loss of his baby that, was the cause of him, starting his work? So was it the cancer? Was it the attempted suicide? Was it the fucking loss of his child? Like, it sort of all becomes a bit muddled in this movie as well, and this is where it starts to become a soap opera, and I kind of love it for that. But Saw 4 is still a fine watch in my opinion. It has a lot of issues, but a lot to really love as well. It has a lot of strong points and a lot of positives, but it also has a lot of negatives as well, in my opinion. But Saw 4 is a fine watch. I hope you all enjoy this movie as well. I think it's still very, very, very enjoyable, but just on the lower tier aspect in regards to my ranking for the Saw films. But guys, what do you think of Saw 4? I want to see what you have to say down in the comment section below. I'm so sorry these videos are taking so long to come out. I've been trying to work hard to get them done. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into it, and a lot of time in editing more than anything else, and finding the time to rewatch these movies in preparation for doing these reviews is also a lot with my work schedule and trying to get other videos done as well. But I'm excited to provide them to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Look out for my Saw 5 video 15 years later coming very, very soon. I'm super excited to provide that to you guys. The Saw 6 one will be another collaboration as well with some of my best friends on the YouTube platform, and I can't wait to provide that one for you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Look out for more videos coming very soon, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.